We were one of the top performing startups in the UK at that time. We won a bunch of awards, we got shitloads of press. It's usually a warning sign. Like, I'm really allergic to all that stuff now because of PTSD from it. We had to go and accept an amazing award at Buckingham Palace at like the same time as being like, gonna have to shut down the company tomorrow. Genuinely that bad. You know, we met the Queen in the same week that we were like having to fire half our team and stuff.
Welcome to The Slowdown, your time to define success and growth on your own terms with a little inspiration from others. We're back in Brazen Studios in London with my guest, Dan Murray-Serter. Dan is the co-founder of Heights, a brain care supplement company, and the co-host of Secret Leaders, a top business podcast with over 50 million downloads. Dan's insights on entrepreneurship, mindset, and personal growth are exactly why I wanted him on this podcast. In this episode, we'll dive into his personal story, the science of brain care, and how slowing down transformed his approach to health and success. Enjoy. Thank you so much, Dan, for being here. I really appreciate your time. I mean, you have such a long list of accomplishments, it's hard to know where to start. You're a serial entrepreneur, angel investor to over 85 startups. You're an advocate for mental health. You're the co-founder of Heights, which is a brain care and gut care company, of which I'm a customer. You're also the co-host of the acclaimed Secret Leaders podcast, where you've interviewed over 500 prominent figures, amassing more than 50 million downloads. You share insights on success and well-being through your podcast, The Science of Success. And I've listened to many of your episodes and read many of your great LinkedIn posts, so I'm very excited that you're here today.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
I actually met you in your beautiful home and had dinner with you and your wife, so I know how much you care about family. I wanted to really start from the start because I'm always really curious about how people came to understand what success means and where that came from in their childhood. So where were you raised and what were you taught success meant at an early age?
So I grew up in an affluent part of London. So I grew up in Primrose Hill. When you're young, you don't know if you are in a poor area or a wealthy area or anything else. We lived in a townhouse. It's not like we lived in a mansion. It was like one room on every floor. It was actually a completely ridiculous house, and that we had to move out of because of my dad's health, because it turns out it's highly impractical to have one room on a floor. But I was taught very early on, always nagged into me, that my parents came from no money. So both my parents had no money and had worked themselves up to be middle class. You know, we moved 5 times in my first 5 or 6 years. So a lot of it was just my mum being really savvy about buy a place, do it up, sell it, move, buy a place, do it up, sell it, move. That was one of the ways we actually just, built up a way to get into the middle class. My parents were very proud about their work ethic and very proud about growing from a very impoverished background, both of them, East London, no money, no wealth in either of their families, to being really proud of where we lived. You know, for them, it was amazing to be living in Primrose Hill. And so for my parents, the idea of success for them was very much about finding a way to take yourself out of where you are right now and doing better and creating like a great, unit of family life, so to speak. I think that sort of simplicity really stayed with me. And it's probably what made me entrepreneurial, this idea of creating something of my own. For example, my dad had a family business. He was always trying to encourage me to join it. And I always refused. And sadly, it was one of those things where the lessons that my dad taught me basically destined me to refuse doing something like that. And I was always like, I don't want your money. I would love to start from scratch myself and figure it all out.
I also found it interesting that areas of London and what people deem to be a life of success depends kind of where you live in London. And that's such a kind of cultural, societal thing of like, oh, you've made it if you now live
Cozy.
In Chelsea. Then, I assume you went to school somewhere locally. What did your report card say? Like, what kind of kid were you?
Very naughty. Basically, my whole entire school career was defined by my dad was always at work. like working really hard in a normal, like normal office hours. My mum had a really cool job. She speaks 5 languages, and so she was a tour guide. So she was an international tour guide. And then as I was getting older, it ended up being more UK because being away a lot was quite difficult. So my mum had more flexibility in her role, meaning that she was, often she could just do a morning and not an afternoon, for example.
You have siblings?
I've got 2 half brothers on my dad's side. So really growing up, it was, sometimes, but they're much older, like 10 years older. So some time spent with them, but like most of my growing up was without them. And my mum would go to school and just get absolutely complained at nonstop by my teachers about how unruly I was and how I just wouldn't pay attention to anything. But I went to a school it's called UCS. It basically is...
UCS? University College School?
Yeah, it's the feeder school for UCL, in theory. So same founder, Jeremy Bentham, very libertarian, very typical place for entrepreneurs to come out of. It was never really strict. You had to really piss them off.
And you were pissing them off?
And I managed to really piss them off quite often because I was just really cheeky and question everything. And I don't like being told something. And I also don't retain information at all if I'm learning. That's kind of my problem in life is, I find it very hard to read a book and remember the lessons. Whenever anyone ever asks me, like, why are you still reading self-help books, which is like by far my number 1 category, I'm like,
I still need a lot of help.
Yeah, I'm hardly walking around with a halo on my head here. Like, I need help every single day. So, like, I need to keep reading these things. But I really improve who I am by behavior. And school is not good for that. School does not set you up for that in any kind of way.
Like rules, follow the rules.
Yeah, so I spent my whole entire school existence doing really badly all the way throughout the year and then cramming like crazy in the exams and then smashing the exams. But I worked really hard. It wasn't one of the so I went to a school with loads of naturally gifted, smart people. And so everyone would get A's and they wouldn't really have to work very hard. And I would get terrible reports all year through, cram like absolutely mad, and then get the A's as well. And that would really piss off the teachers because they're like, this kid doesn't really deserve A's. Even though he's working at the end, that's not how we're trying to do things. So I had this all the way up until I was about 16. And at 16, my mum was like, you know what? I refuse to go to any more parent days. I'm not doing them ever again. Like, I'm so sick of this. Like, I just can't do this. And my mum really values education and my dad doesn't value education. He got kicked out at 16, didn't do university and doesn't care and that's not his thing. Whereas my mum was the first person in her family to go to university. She went to university in Berlin. So they're very different attitudes to education. And my dad was but he was a bit stricter and a bit more like, you better not fucking mess this up. Because, he was paying for me to go to private school, right? And that was the biggest expense in our life. We were archetypal middle-class family where one of your parents' entire salary is going on your school, full stop. So it was a big deal for them. It was my mum's entire annual salary went on my education. So my dad was like, your mum's lost it and that's taken a long time. So I'm turning up this year. Anyway, the message really landed with me and I turned into the perfect student that year. I was just like fucking terrified that my dad was going to go to the parent day and get the same treatment my mum did. And so I turned into an angel that year. And every single teacher gave me the most glowing report. My dad came back they always joke about it and I always remember it. And he was like, I don't know what you're fucking talking about, but
what's the drama?
Everyone thinks he's a genius. He's wonderful. He's like lovely. They've all got great things to say about it. My mum's like, oh, gaslit to the nth degree. It always really made me laugh. And yeah, turns out a little bit of authority or switching a parent round to put the fear of God into you really worked for me.
But is there something here that really shows how you create an entrepreneur in some of these stories, which is unruly, lack of interest in the structure, but then also being the ultimate salesperson for yourself and your personal brand and going, I can completely change if needed, depending on what I want as the outcome.
It's a weird thing. Like I struggle with focus because I just always have done. But I can see a goal in mind and be like, this is the most important thing. And then my friends will be like, do you want to go out? Do you want to do this? I'm like, no, I'm doing nothing but this one thing. Right. And so I've always been quite good at that, at being like, this is the one thing that I'm really focusing on. Because otherwise, in general, my biggest criticism I get from all my friends, my business partners, everyone is I spread myself too thin. Mm-hmm. Like that is a lifelong problem. And it's always been my problem. But if there's like a single priority that needs addressing more than anything else, I'm pretty good.
That's good. And you mentioned your ADHD before. I'd just like to sort of talk about that. When were you diagnosed, or when did you know that that was something that you had, and how do you best handle?
So over the last few years running Heights, quite a few people who work at Heights have diagnosed ADHD who are like also medical professionals. So, they're like just the amount of people that have been like you just archetypal, like you don't even need to get a diagnosis, but you might as well. The reason I was always like quite anti getting a diagnosis for what it's worth is because I don't like excuses. I'm just fully myself. Yeah. Like at all times, I'm unapologetically me. That is probably, most people that work with me would say that's probably the best thing about me and the worst thing about me. Like for sure. There is no like work Dan. There is no dad Dan. There is no husband Dan. There's like Dan. I'm just like the same person, like in all these things. So the lack of attention and focus and all of this kind of stuff, I mean, that permeates no matter what I'm doing. Like I probably make 10 times the amount of effort psychologically when I'm with my daughter not to do that. A really great example of it is I was able to break my Twitter addiction by moving the app off my home screen, because even though I literally will pick up my phone and go, I wonder what's going on Twitter right now. That's what's going on in my head. I want to know what's going on Twitter. Open my phone. First thing I see is not a big shiny X like icon. It's someone's WhatsApp me. I'm like, oh, WhatsApp. Okay, I'll click that. Right. And then I'm like, oh, okay. Oh, yeah, no, good point. All right, I need to check my calendar actually for that one. Oh, God, I had to go into my emails. Emails done. Okay, fine. In some kind of weird doom loop, and I put my phone away and I'm done. And like hours later, I might be like, oh yeah, I was going to check Twitter. And I swear to God, exactly the same thing happens. So I'm like, I don't know how to describe it, but I honestly, sometimes I do this stuff and it's funny to me. I'm like laughing at myself. And sometimes it's unbelievably infuriating, right? Because I'm like, someone asked me to do something. Right, I go in a tab on my laptop on like, whatever thing I need to do. Can you sign up for this thing? Can you do that thing? I'm like, yes, 100%. And I open up my laptop to do the thing. And in the space between, this is what I'm trying to do and I'm going to do it, hours pass of me doing something completely different. And that person's like, do you do it yet? And I'm like, oh my God, how did I not do that? And that is my day every single day. It's so infuriating. So the way around it is like I try and create some systems for myself, like some measures of things that are like non-negotiables. I put loads of things in my calendar and I live by it and it's good, and I try not to be late for things by making sure that I'm really early, because the way the brain works in general is you'll always, positively underestimate, not overestimate. And so that stuff definitely helps, but it's infuriating when you need to do something and you just literally, you're one step away from doing it. And all my intentions are great. And the one thing that that's helped me a lot over the last few years is, I'm a massive people pleaser as well. So one thing that's really helped me is like learning how to say no and protect my time in an empathetic way. And I've only really done that since I became a dad. Mm-hmm. But, I'm always acutely fascinated by and curious about how to manage energy as a person. It's an infinite source, but only if you recharge your battery and you make sure that you've got balance in your life and you're doing the things that you need to do that do recharge your battery, and that you've got to do hard things that don't recharge your battery and are boring, especially as a founder. Like so much of that job is boring and doesn't recharge your battery. So then what do I need to do to make sure I do recharge my battery? And so that when I'm with my daughter, I'm like, best me. I don't want to be drained me.
What are your top 3 ways to refill your energy?
So I have just been going really deep on understanding dopamine, sort of unrelated to the Twitter fast, but great coincidental timing, because obviously Twitter is just dopamine hits, short dopamine hits all the time. But I've been reading 2 different books. One's called DOSE, which stands for dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins. And the other book is The Molecule of More, which is more like the historical scientific exploration of dopamine. Just by reading those, I've been trying to understand, the idea of dopamine really, like as we understand dopamine broadly in culture, we understand it through watching shows or listening to smart people who talk about, how quick dopamine hits are so bad for you, right? But actually, dopamine is essentially the molecule required for motivation and for building up energy. And the traditional way that you would get that is by doing hard things, doing things you don't necessarily want to do that are quite rewarding. So actually, a conversation like this, for example, this is oxytocin, right? It's like nice energy between two people who are interested in being in a room together, etc. But dopamine, perfect example is just go to gym, right? Like do a hard workout or go for a run, amazing dopamine. Wake up a little bit early and do something.
Eat the frog, as they say.
Eat the frog. I was referencing Eat the Frog yesterday, and I hadn't referenced it in about 5 years, and it's twice in 48 hours. But Eat the Frog is a great one, right? Which is if the hardest thing you need to do today is eat a frog, then just eat the frog. Get it done, and then you'll move on. And that is a great way to solve procrastination. So the 3 things I've been doing at the moment is I've been leaving my phone downstairs at 9 p.m. and going up and reading a book before I go to bed, and I don't check it for the first hour in the morning. So I've already automatically refrained from quick dopamine hits, because quick spikes will be quick up and quick down. So that's
like
not
sugar.
helpful. Correct.
Like a glucose spike.
Correct. Exactly like that. And actually sugar is still the number one worst thing for dopamine hits. And I think social media is like number 2. So if I was a proper tech bro, I'd be all like, ice path, babe. But I'm a massive pussy, so I'm just like splash water in my face for 10 seconds, like freezing cold water, because I just can't handle it.
Have you tried cold shower, like quick cold shower?
Yeah, I've tried it, and I have done it a couple of times this week. I'm just not there on 7 days a week yet. It's too manly for me. I can't handle it. But that's absolutely the next step. But that is an amazing way to build up dopamine, like amazing. I've been using a Shakti mat. Have you ever had one of those?
The spiky ones?
Yeah, it's basically just like a bed of needles. Just doing that for like 5 minutes, because it hurts, but it feels quite rewarding, and it's just good for me.
So even if you do it for a short period of time, 5 minutes?
You can do it for a minute.
Okay.
Yeah, you can do it for a minute and you'll build up dopamine, because it's hard. Like the easiest way of saying any of this stuff, anything that's like a bit uncomfortable or a bit hard, obviously a minute of that will give me, a minute worth of value on the dopamine hit, and 10 minutes is 10 minutes more. And so all of these, the same way, my splashing face for 10 seconds will give me half the value of a shower, which is again half the value of 3 minutes in an ice bath. So there are levels to the game. But also I don't have infinite time in the morning. So I'm just trying to do some hard things in a rhythm from when I wake up to when I'm getting my daughter out of bed. And I've just created a bit of space for myself. So I'm making sure that before I get myself a little addiction hit, I'm setting myself up for the day in a positive way. And all of those things are essentially making sure I've got a better energy, a better energy supply during the day.
Before we move on to your next way that you build up your energy again, it's so interesting to me how our culture and capitalism spends so much time trying to make your life more easeful.
Yeah.
So the goal of capitalism is, we'll make the coffee for you, we'll deliver it straight to you. You can use Deliveroo and all of these apps to just bring the groceries straight to your door. You don't even have to go. And I think
now you have to go out of your way to get 10,000 steps. Whereas it would have just been easy to get 10,000 steps if I just had to get the things I need.
Do some errands.
Yeah. And
I think there's so much to that with what you're saying, which is if we remove all of these hard things from our lives, we then have to, if we want to be healthy, artificially re-add. This is my problem with a lot of wellness culture, is I see women doing all sorts of things in the morning, and I'm like, but you would get a lot of this stuff would happen if you just lived a more normal life.
And my number one wellness hack in the whole entire world, always and forever, is just walking. I easily walk 10,000 steps a day because I make an effort to walk 10,000 steps a day. But it's a perfect example. This morning, taking my daughter to nursery. I could drive, but we walked. I put her in the buggy. We walked. It was a nice day. That's 7,000 steps right there.
What's the second way that you recharge your batteries? So the first is dopamine and all of the doing hard things.
Yeah. So managing dopamine, honestly, again, it all depends on your family setup, so to speak. But for me, committing to being present for my wife and daughter. So, knowing that I've got time saved that I am going to spend with my family, uninterrupted, nothing to do with work, nothing to do with ambition, nothing to do with anything other than just feeling grateful. That is really important to me. And then the third and most important non-negotiable, as I've just mentioned, it is honestly walking. I go to the gym 4 times a week. I play paddle with my friends, which is social, which is a new thing for me, but I suddenly realized last year I'd gone from someone who doesn't really exercise much to someone who probably over-exercised and got up to 6 or 7 days a week of exercising because I'm classic, got to do everything. And then sort of realized, I don't really like exercising. I started playing paddle And I was like, oh, this is really fun. It's like social. There's 4 of you, it's not that serious, all this kind of stuff. And so this year I was like, I'm going to add something fun into exercise, because I don't think, at some point in my head, I'm like, I guess not all my exercising has to be, around this toxic idea that I have inside my wellness head, which is that like, I got to stay fit and healthy. Like, probably could make some space to have fun. Like, that's not so bad.
I'd like to kind of go back to the timeline, the chronology that we started with. Unruly kid, clear, like fertile ground for entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
How did you start your first business? And then how did, from starting the first one, get you to heights?
Well, that would be a very long story. So to tell it, I guess, quickly, when I graduated university in 2008, it was a financial crisis. So there were no jobs. And I went to work in the pub, and my parents were pretty gutted after all that education that I ended up literally just pulling pints for a year. I would talk about, my passions and dreams and stuff, to any punter that came in and, really talking to them. Some guy offered me a job in sales, and I was like, yeah, I'll do anything to get into a corporate world at this point. Kind of makes sense for me. Anyway, he turned out to be a complete psychopath. I worked for him for a year. But like, when I say psychopath, I had to get a restraining order against him. It was insane. I had to be in the office at 8 a.m. It was about an hour and a half to get there. It was quite brutal. No one to sell to at 8 a.m. It was just a power play from him, and I had to leave at 7 and all this kind of stuff. I was getting paid 12 grand a year. So not even legal, I don't think, even then. But it was a financial crisis. There were no jobs. So you were just lucky to have a job. I learned how to hustle really hard working in that job, because it was basically entirely commission based on sales. I ended up getting poached by someone else into their company, and then, which it made him go completely psycho. And then when I had to get the restraining order, and then the director of that company that poached me, I was 23 at the time, was like, I want to start a new division, a new company. I want you to lead it, because I was doing really, really well. So that kind of all, he gave me an opportunity then to sort of start a new thing. And that was quite exciting because it was quite secure. But my best friend Joel, who I'd gone to school with and university with, he was at PwC, and he was having a terrible time because he was like, his parents, as lots of parents do, forced him to do accounting because they're like, you can do anything with this, which obviously annoyingly is true. But, if you have an entrepreneurial spirit and you're in PwC, then you're dying a little inside. So he couldn't wait to get out. He nagged me into basically joining him. We didn't really have a plan, but he was very much like, here's Warby Parker, here's Casper, here's all these really cool things going on in America. Like, they're going to come here. Here's like a chart of, how much e-commerce is growing. And here's a chart of like GDP growth. And I'm like, I don't understand any of this shit at all. And I'm not interested. I'm here for the vibes. Like, I don't get business like that, really. But I get how to like create things and sell them to people. Like, so like, why don't we just team up and try it? And so at that age, I moved. So I was 24. I moved back in with my mum. My dad had sadly passed away in the last year. So like, that'd been quite a hard year as well. And what was sad was my dad had always wanted me to go into my own business. I'd said no. And then I was starting something on my own, which he was always like quite excited for and proud of. But he wasn't really able, like, it kind of just got off the ground just after he passed away, which is, I always think is a shame, but at least I did it. And I moved in with my mum, which, I would have done anyway, because timing-wise, it was just the right thing to do. But it also was fortuitous timing. It was unbelievably undateable, because no one wants to date someone that's living with their mum at 24.
Might as well work.
But that's kind of the thing that's hilarious. Yeah, it's all a self-fulfilling prophecy. You know that you're not going to get laid because no one thinks that's cool. So you might as well not even bother. So you might as well just throw yourself into work. And hey, the more you work, the more you're going to like learn the lessons and go through the cycle. That worked really, really well for us. Like, we both just hunkered down and worked. My mum still reminisces about how Joel and I spent best part of a year just in her kitchen, just like, with papers and like sticking up stuff up on the wall and like, no, that won't work, and like all this kind of stuff. But before you can get an office, like, if you've got a roof over your head and a mum that will tolerate that stuff, then you've got all you need.
And what did you start?
So we started a company called Grabble, which was a mobile shopping app, which is quite funny because I'd sworn I'd never go into fashion because my dad was in fashion manufacturing and I really hated it. I just didn't care about fashion. Do you know what it was? It was like, and I think this about a lot of industries, but fashion particularly, there's such a supply and demand thing in fashion. Like, so many people want to work in fashion. Like, it's their dream job. It felt ridiculously selfish to take up one of those jobs, regardless of anything, when I didn't care. Like, it's one of those jobs that, like,
you guys did it because the spreadsheets and the charts said this is the nexus of where
correct
the opportunity is.
Correct. And we ended up building this like tech company, basically, this mobile app company, figuring out how to work with developers we'd never met before, and like flying to Poland, like, which actually I loved. Like, we found a development house in Poland, and I think my favorite times running Grabble full stop were going to Poland once a month. We just had a really great time. It was beautiful. And so we had this like funny thing where we ended up being one of the startup darlings, where there was we had to raise a lot of money. We had a really big team. We were in one of these, big open plan startup offices where like 90% of people were men, and the only women in the office basically worked with us, because like all the jobs, you do a normal job. You do a normal job interview with anyone, blind tests, non-bias, etc. I mean, the supply and demand for women versus men in that space is so off the charts that obviously it would always be women that would get the jobs. They would just be better at what we needed them to do. So we ended up running this like very fashion heavy company, which was great. Like, we had loads of fun. It was a really, really good few years. But then it all imploded because the business model was terrible. Because in fashion, a lot of the business models outside of luxury are terrible. We had, 1 million monthly active users. We grew really, really big, and we were one of the top performing startups in the UK at that time. We won a bunch of awards. We got shitloads of press. It's usually a warning sign. Like, I'm really allergic to all that stuff now because of PTSD from it. Right. Like, we had to go and accept an amazing award at Buckingham Palace at like the same time as being like, I think we're gonna have to shut down the company tomorrow. It's like genuinely that bad. We met the Queen in the same week that we were like having to fire half our team and stuff. It's just like, and it feels disingenuous.
Yeah, keeping up appearances.
Totally. So anyway, the company imploded. The revenue model was awful. Brexit was kind of the final nail in the coffin because investors just stopped investing in businesses that weren't like printing money. And so we ended up having to completely shut down the company and having to start again from scratch. And over this period, over the last couple of years, we'd both had really bad health experiences. So Joel had really, really bad gut health problems from stress. And I'd had insomnia. I had a whole bunch of other mental health problems over the last 10 years anyway. Anxiety, bulimia, burnout, depression. But then the worst thing that I'd ever had was insomnia. And so I had insomnia for 6 months and I just couldn't sleep, and it was horrendous. One day, after trying all the different things, a friend of mine who I was out for dinner with, she was like, sounds like you've got a brain health problem. And I was like, I don't know about that, love. Also, what is brain health? I don't get that comment at all. And it just sounds weird. Like, it sounds weird. Still sounds weird. She was like, listen, I think you should go see a dietitian. You should go get your nutrition levels checked out. And I was like, okay, fair enough. And so I went because at that time I was able to say, listen, I've already tried everything else. I've tried sleeping pills. I've tried, psychological interventions. I've been to all these different therapists. Like, none of those things have worked. So it was quite easy for her to say, all right, well,
try this.
Yeah, try these supplements. So she basically told me to go to Planet Organic, which was hilarious because I was like, I just told you that my company's like failing. I can't shop at Planet Organic. Like, at best, I shop at Iceland at the moment. But she was like, no, you've got to get these from Planet Organic, because if you go to Boots or Holland and Barrett or somewhere on the high street, you don't get the quality that you need. So she was the first person to explain to me that in supplement space, there is a difference between the marketing amount that you can make a claim for and the actual amount that's the scientific dosage that you need.
Of the ingredient.
And so this is like an entire problem in the whole entire supplement space, which is that the worst product in the world can say exactly the same thing as the best product in the world. There is no difference between the marketing claim those two products can make.
As long as they hit the minimum.
As long as they hit the minimum amount. So the guys that put in the right amount have a big old marketing and brand problem of like, but how do you really tell a consumer? Because we're legally not allowed to say anything more than the worst product. And so the incentive is that 99% of people just make the worst product, because why wouldn't you?
And is it cheaper to put in less of the...
It's much cheaper, right. Of course. And so, the anchoring that we have, especially here in the UK, right? The anchoring is like supplements for 5 or 10 quid. most of the time a supplement that's 5 or 10 quid, pound for pound, is costing you exactly the same as a supplement that's 40 or 50 pounds. You're just getting a tenth of it because they can get away with that. So this is like the first time when I was like, I had no idea that was a thing. Okay, I'll go to Planet Organic. I bought these 3 supplements.
What were the ingredients?
DHA omega-3, B vitamin complex, and blueberry extract. And the reason is because she said that DHA omega-3 is the building block of your brain. So your brain is 60% fat, and 90% of that fat is one compound, which is DHA omega-3. So it's the core building block of your brain. B vitamins regulate your energy, so they help your synapses essentially speak to each other, fire on all cylinders, all that kind of stuff, think quickly, but also regulate your energy. So with insomnia, you're trying to sleep at midnight and you're having a burst of energy. Like your energy's all over the place. You shouldn't be doing that, and then it's like 8 a.m. and you've got to go to work and you're crashing. So it's like completely inverted. So that's like actually nutritionally, B vitamins will help you just regulate your energy as your body's natural energy supply. And then the blueberry extract is a powerful antioxidant. And she was saying it's to give my lymphatic system a clean. But what she dumbed it down for me, she said, it's like giving your brain a car wash overnight. And I was like, oh, okay, very nice analogy. So she did a really good job of explaining basically why I needed these things. And I went and I took them and I spent £120 on 3 supplements. I had no idea that supplements were expensive in the first place, let alone that expensive. 3 days later, I had my first full night's sleep till 7 a.m. And I was like, holy crap, I can't believe that that's worked. And so I became personally super interested in this space. This is obviously the starting point for Heights.
So I actually don't have a sponsor and there aren't any commercial breaks in this season. Instead, I wanted to use this little pause to say how much we would love to hear from you. We want to get to know our audience better. There are lots of different ways to practice slowing down and lots of different people and stories we can hear from. So please leave a comment or a review on this episode to share your thoughts. Tools you use to slow down, someone you'd like to suggest for the show, or just your thoughts on the episode. This really helps us plan future episodes and cover things that you might be interested in. Now, back to the show.
And it sounds like a completely different starting point to Grabble, which was an industry you had no real interest in. This is a personal experience that you've had that's changed your life.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think there's lots of different types of entrepreneurs. And I think one of the reasons why I ended up with depression in my last business and all this kind of stuff is I was essentially turning up to work. Everyone's telling me I'm amazing. And like we're getting lots of awards and lots of adulation. People want to work with us. It's very glitzy. And everyone's giving you these compliments of things you feel massive imposter syndrome because you don't want to do it. There was never any passion or reason. In fact, for me, it was like the literally diametric opposite thing that I ever wanted to do, right? I did not want to work in fashion. So, and I'd always told my dad that. So I also had like a bit of guilt that my dad's now dead. I never worked for him and I built my own fashion company. Like literally, how did I get here? So I had that whole thing. It made me really unhappy where other people would have been really happy and really grateful for it. I felt this sense of disappointment that I was ungrateful for something I was so lucky to have. It's just out of alignment is a perfect way of describing it. When it failed, I felt an enormous sense of relief. Years of my life wasted, but lots of valuable lessons. Like there is no waste, right? But
which you've taken to Heights.
Exactly, which you take into Heights and you take in something that you're like, this feels really exciting. I actually really care about it. And also, most importantly, I had personal evidence from my own experience that this could actually help someone. Like, it helped me. If you have insomnia or any mental health disease for a long enough, you get to a point where you don't actually believe that anything will ever cure it. You kind of just think, this is just where I'm stuck now. And like, that's totally where suicidal thoughts come in because you're like, I can't literally live like this. So because that had like literally created a solution for me, and I was like, I can't get over that this has helped. Surely more people need to know about this. All I've ever heard about supplements is that they're crap, that they don't work. There's so much, confusing information and misinformation out there. So I decided that the logical way for me to approach this, because I'd had really bad imposter syndrome in my last business, and I thought I'd have it even worse in this business because I'm not even from this space. I was like, listen, as long as I do the right thing, slowly but surely, I will do the right thing over time. And so I was like, the right thing feels like I'm going to read PubMed, so Public Medical Journal Records of Health, because what is confusing for me as a consumer is just like any old nutritionist saying whatever they want on social media. Maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. I don't know. But science is science, right? So I will just go and read PubMed. I'd never read PubMed before. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a neuroscientist, I'm not a nutritionist, but I'm like, that is a record of science. So I will just research articles that are like about what that trial did, what that study said, like, et cetera, et cetera. And once a week, and this was my process, and I'd read a book at the time that was all about manifestation and neuroplasticity. I'll never be a neuroscientist if I don't take the course and do the thing. But if I commit every single week to read a science paper on a narrow range of topics, in 4 or 5 years, compounding
10,000 hours.
Yeah, right. 100%, right. I will be not just smarter than I was before about that topic, but I'll be able to hold my ground. And also my anchoring of where I get the information from will be from science papers, which means that it will never be untrue. Science is weird because someone can prove your science wrong and create new science, but it would always be a record of like what was true at the time. So, you know, this area where I get really uncomfortable is like, no one will be able to say that I'm a charlatan.
But then what you did that was great for the greater good and the public good is that you read each of those articles and then you kind of transmuted and translated them into an understandable language and shared them in a newsletter.
Yeah. So that was really cool. And I'm really, really proud of that. Just for 2019, first newsletter I ever sent, maybe like 10 readers, obviously my mum, Joel's mum, you know, a few others. So the newsletter became that process for me, where the knowledge felt like I was, you know, gaining knowledge and I was rewriting it in my own way and I was sharing it. And so, you know, almost because it's a process for me versus like, how big can I make this? There's going to be a huge company. Like, I didn't have an idea for a company at the time. But as a result of like focusing on having a newsletter and doing something that I thought was important for myself to feel comfortable about this space, it made an enormous difference. And eventually led to starting Heights. Told you there was no short way of telling that story.
I mean, it's a great story and I'm so glad that you told it. And I then obviously hear about Heights because it was 2020, it came out, it was beautiful branding, beautiful product design, beautiful packaging, like the sort of molded boxes that it came in, really great ambassadors. Stephen Fry was involved, I think, very early on.
First customer.
That's cool.
We got so lucky.
And then just like the whole business model just looked so great. Obviously from afar, I know that there would be a lot of internal challenges in running any business, but I heard you say, and you know, really so much of this podcast is about slowing down, figuring things out for yourself. And I heard you say, as a founder, you learn that you're not paid for your stamina, you're paid for your decision making. Overworking, giving yourself burnout, not taking space to rest, not listening to what you know to be true is bad decision making. If you can't be the CEO of your body, you can't be the CEO of your company. I really wanted to hear you just kind of speak into that because it seems to me almost counter to the hustle culture idea of entrepreneurship that I was fed.
The value of a company is essentially the value of the good decisions you've made. And those compound over time. Now, in reality, I think that, you know, the practical way that we think about running a company at Heights is there's loads of decisions that need to be made. Some will make you look like a genius and some will make you look like an idiot. So there's a very good framework from Jeff Bezos, which is about one-way doors and two-way doors. And the idea is, and it's how he's run and scaled Amazon with this thesis the whole entire time, which is empowering his teams, make a decision. If it's a two-way door, so you can make a decision, and if you're wrong, you can walk back out that door again, and you know, we've lost some money, we've lost some things, whatever, no problem. But if it's a one-way door, which is like, you know, we make this decision and it really changes the force of the company. In an Amazon example, it's like, hey, should we do AWS? Should we do, you know, some enormous, incredible, massive investment in web infrastructure and stuff? It's like, it's not a small door that you can just close. The doors that are one way, I spend loads of time debating it. You know, literally get in meetings, in groups, slow down, really think that one through. The ones that you can just get out there and just do them. And see if you're wrong. And, you know, at Heights, there's a really, like, few good examples. Creating a product is a one-way door. So you really got to make a really strong decision. And at Heights, you know, a good example of that is we had that one product, Vitals, in the market for 3 years, nothing else. Because we were just so deliberate about that. And the second product that we were making, which is our probiotic, took 3 years to make. Because it's like, not just a one-way door, but something we were like, we want all the trials. We want it to be the best. We want to be able to demonstrate that it's the best. And launching it early damages our reputation over a long term. So we need to, and Heights is actually the perfect example of a slowdown company. The only startup I know in this space who launched in 2020 and by 2023 only still had one product in the market. Like, that is really rare. What people do in our space is they launch the next one, the next one, the next one, the next one. It's all about more revenue, more revenue,
How
more
did
revenue.
you manage the expectations of your investors?
Yes, that's the right question. And that was really hard. That was the hardest thing because no one agreed with our strategy. So the best business advice I give to entrepreneurs, in my opinion, that come to me and ask for advice is when you take investment, take as much as you want. Don't worry so much about the equity, because the equity is about how rich you'll get in the future. But there's only so much that people can do with money. So, however, if you want a fulfilling life, then worry about control. Who is able to make decisions? Are you and your co-founder, are you the ones who are able to make the decisions? The moment you give up the control where your investors can tell you what to do, then you're in a bad spot. And I think the one thing, it's very weird entrepreneurship in the sense of like, you leave your parents, you go for your independence, you become like an adult, and then you go
You're a
in with
slave to your
investors. Yeah, you go with investors and then they start telling you what to do and you're like, God, they are smarter than me. They do know. And you're like, wait a minute, I'm not a child. Like, I actually can think for myself, but you almost have to defend yourself as a adult who they have invested in, that you've got agency and that you're capable of making good decisions. And so it took me a long time to realize that, like a long time. But with Heights, we had such a deliberate perspective on the market, which is that the reason we'd both got in such bad health spots anyway is because when you look online and you try and understand what's good for you and what's not, it's confusing anyway. So we were like, I understand the need, obviously growing Heights, I understand the need of being culturally relevant, having to work with influencers, all this stuff. I get it. I really get it. But you have to be really credible on the back end. Like our whole thing was we have to be a scientifically rigorous company. And the only way that you can really do that is by investing in trials. Well, trials cost a lot of money and they take time. Yeah. So for us, it was like the only way to do that is in years. It's literally thinking in years and survival over years. So the investor journey was super interesting on the basis of we were just really deliberate about it. And we got really lucky where one of our customers became an investor and just completely obsessed over our business and wanted and really believed in our strategy and what we wanted to do. And that was Nicola Kilner, who's the founder of The Ordinary. You know, she'd obviously lost her co-founder and like to mental health, and she was maybe right time, right place. I don't know, but she just really bought into what we were doing at Heights. And the fact that we were like, we're going slow and we're doing the right things in the back end. And this is the trial that we've got going on over here. And that's the trial we've got going on over there. And she was the first person who met us and wasn't like, when's the next product coming out? She was like, well, it comes out when it comes out. And we're like, yes, exactly. So we got lucky that, you know, or I say lucky, I mean, obviously
intentional. It's incredibly
yes,
intentional.
that's more it, right?
As you say, you learnt from the PTSD of your first business. And what I see so much of, especially in basically the last 10 years of entrepreneurship that I've had, is seeing so many of the, you know, social media posts of we got A round, we got B round, this is how much we've raised, this is how much we've raised. And the kind of congratulations comes based on how much money did you raise?
Yes, and
versus how much control did you just lose?
Exactly. And we've at Heights, we've done a bunch of rounds and everyone has always been like, so is the C, the A, whatever. We're like, we don't name rounds. A, we don't name rounds. We don't know. And B, we're not PRing it. We had an interesting thing in the summer where the Sunday Times picked up a story with us because we did crowdfunding. So it got picked up. So like, we want to do a story with you. And obviously we were like, okay, this is pretty cool getting Sunday Times business or whatever. But then we were like, okay, remember the lessons. Let's champion the customer. You know, there's a great book in brand storytelling called Story Brand. And there's a great line in it, and I always say it to the team, always, which is, you are not the champion of your story. Your customer is the champion of your story.
Correct.
So instead we were like, you know what? It would be really cool to get Joel and I, you know, crossed arms, round, business Sunday Times, get it framed. We were like, you know what? Let's just get one of our really culturally relevant ambassadors who loves the product so much. Let's just use them as the image. And so Vogue Williams is like one of our absolute obsessives. And she was like, yeah, like, obviously happy to do it if you want. You sure you don't want to just be in the photo? We're like, no, you just do it. It's fine. So we're like, you know, it's good to come back to the, you know, the lessons so that you're authentic, which is like, as to your point, it's not the business has to achieve some success that's authentic. And a funding round is a milestone. It's not a moment of success, sadly. It's important, it's cool, it creates new jobs, it creates new opportunities. But I've made all those mistakes before. And so really it's about how sustainable the business is and what the business is going to achieve.
And what's your relationship like now with awards and lists and sort of getting these pats on the back by society?
Anyone that's worked with me at Heights would know that I personally have been our biggest obstruction to this stuff. Last year, there was almost an intervention from the team, basically, which is that this is harming us. So basically, I was really anti-PR and really anti-awards and lists and anything like that. Really, like, properly. And so anyone would come to us and I'm like, it's just garbage, guys, focus. And so last year we had a bunch of the people in the team basically be like, Dan, enough. Like, we do need to do that stuff. Like, it's actually important for the brand.
And it gives them credit too.
Gives them credit and all this kind of stuff. So, we had a really productive conversation, like really, really early on last year. And I was like, you know what? Like, fair enough. Seeing as someone has actually taken the time, or people had actually taken the time as a group to explain to me the value for everyone, then I was like, okay, let's go for it. But I was like, we're going to do it our way. And so every 2 months, I set up a dinner in a private dining room, like 15 journalists, and a few of my employees could come and join. And so we'd make a night of it. And we would tell them, this is the science behind what we're doing at the moment. This is the science we think is really interesting that's coming up. These are the things. And we were like, this is what we find interesting. This is the science narrative about what we're doing. And these are the science papers. And by the way, we're biased. So go check these facts and make sure that we're not lying. But that was so the right way to do it. We built up personal one-to-one relationships with loads of journalists at all the top titles over the course of the year. Each dinner was maybe £2,000 or £3,000, and we did one every couple of months. But by the end of the year, we'd had 60 or 70 pieces of mainstream, PR hits, which all, and this is the part that I guess my blind spot was, really helped the brand. Definitely helped to bring down our cost per acquisition, because there's more awareness of the brand and more awareness where people are seeing us. And then as a byproduct of that, winning awards. And so I think that's actually a valuable entrepreneurship lesson, right? Which is, in failure, you can get quite deep with yourself about what your non-negotiable hard lessons were. And
build walls and boundaries.
And
I learned this. This was my mistake. I can never.
Yeah, so I'll never do that again. And no, and you become quite dogmatic about the thing. And that's actually just not a healthy way to be. The best entrepreneurs are pragmatic, and I am a pragmatic person. I think it's very important to remember when you're an entrepreneur and you go through something painful, that was an important lesson for then. Use it, but it doesn't mean that it's your lifelong lesson. A bit, you always got to come back to some flexibility and flexible thinking.
My partner has a thing, this is a small analogy, with mushrooms. He doesn't like eating mushrooms, but he does an annual reappraisal. So his memory is, I hate mushrooms. I don't like them at all. I've tasted lots of different mushrooms, never liked any of them. Yeah. We'll be in an opportunity a year later where there is a mushroom in a saucer on a pizza, and he'll go, I'm very happy to reappraise and see how I feel about mushrooms.
Right, that's great.
And he's still don't like them. Yeah. But he's open to checking where he's at with stuff.
But if you think about it, every person that ever drinks coffee has definitely done that as a kid. Because you drink coffee, you're like, ugh, no. And at some point, you're an adult drinking coffee.
What is your current working definition of success after all of these experiences that you've had and the neuroplasticity of reappraising some of your prior biases? What does success mean or look like to you now?
I've actually tried to work this out with a sort of, almost equation the other day, which is you definitely need the sort of art of fulfillment. So whatever feeling fulfilled looks like to you is really important, as is the kind of, I guess, science of achievement, right? So I think that success either is a multiple of those things or a division of those things or the sum of it in some way. But if you're just achieving and you're not feeling fulfilled, you're fucked. You're on a hedonic treadmill and you're going the wrong way. If you're just feeling fulfilled, but you're not achieving very much, then maybe you've got really low bar and reality is going to hit you in the face at some point, potentially, because we do live in a materialistic world and there are realities of things that people need. So I think there's some magical space between feeling fulfilled and achieving things that keep each other in balance. Because either of those things, like just achieving those things, is going to make you into like a brilliant dickhead anyway, and you won't be able to have gratitude for those things. And so I've given a lot of thought lately. Once a year, I do like an audit of everything I'm doing in my life. I spend a lot of time. I go to a cabin.
Is it a spreadsheet?
All sorts. I've got a document.
Okay. And you go to a cabin in the woods.
And I go to a cabin in the woods and I do my document, and it takes, like a whole day. And I really, really think through. It's just a whole bunch of powerful questions, right? Like, what did I do this year? Like, did it make me happy? Like, what was like the key? What was the best thing that happened in January? What was the best thing that happened in February? And for people that are looking to create these kind of processes in their life or these kind of things, it's very important, coming back to toxic wellness, it's very important not to do them at the wrong time because you're in a rush, because it's December or something. It's like life will go on. Like, the days, the months of the year are made up in many ways. Like if you end up doing it in January, if you end up doing it in February, hey, it's July and it's the first time you can get around to it. That's fine. Yeah. So long as you're doing it with a good frame of mind and you're in a good space and you can think critically about these things, I think that's far more important than rushing them. But I spend the time thinking about what's going well and what's not going well. And it's just very high level, right? And, the things that aren't going well, what are the things that I can do to change that? The things that are going well, what can I do, that was going to give me more of that? We've all got so much time in the day. Like everyone has the same amount of time. So how am I going to just make sure that I allocate my time on a day, week, monthly basis? And, ever since having my daughter, like the obvious thing so quickly was I want to spend time with my daughter. And that has just grown and grown and grown for me. So when I do this appraisal, I'm like, genuinely, I'm like, how can I spend more time with Margot? And, like doing that is great because, something gives. And what gives is I'm like, and my mum's getting older. So I'm like, I want to do those things. And so I'm like, well, I'll just have to see my friends less.
Right. I was going to say, what is the thing that you have to reduce?
I'll just see my friends less. And, I'm more critical about, which friends I'll see. And it doesn't mean that I don't like, the friends that I'm not seeing or whatever at all. It just means that something's got to give.
Right. With a finite amount of time.
Totally. And, and I'm, every single weekend I'll go and take my daughter to my mum's and we'll spend half a day there. So, that's already that's a quarter of a whole weekend, which is like my free time that I know is being used well. Right. And another half the day I spend just me and Margot, like doing something.
A lot of our time is spent on things like emails, being reactive and not actually utilizing the things that we're best at. Yeah. How do you reduce your time on emails? Is that something that you can like give to team, or is that still something you struggle with?
I'm terrible at this. No, I do spend a lot of time on emails. I'm not your poster boy for efficiency on emails.
What I struggle with is that it takes up so much of my time. And the thing that I'm good at, which is being a creative director, storyteller, coming up with high-level creative, I have to do in the evening or on the weekend because I'm so bogged down by the daily. And you're good at time blocking. So I'm wondering, do you have things like, I'm going for a walk, no emails? Or do you have a way of...
I do sometimes, but, I just end up I find myself, I do this for like a couple of weeks or whatever, and then one day I look at it, I'm like, wait, when did I stop? When did that habit just stop? And I've tried all different software as well. I found a few that like do good like auto replies. I'm like, that's good enough, just fucking send it. One of the best, the thing is about, having a social media presence at all is you get so much, demand for your time. And so and especially like if you do angel investing, right? And you're in the entrepreneurship world, people want to send you their decks, they want to do all these things. That's absolutely fine because you want to actually participate back in, the ecosystem where you've been helped too. So my framing, which has worked so unbelievably well, is, hey, this looks great. I don't have any time right now. Can you message me again in a month? And I'll take a look. 99% never email you again.
That's what Matt Klein said.
It's absolutely amazing. And the 1% that do, you're like, no problem.
Great.
I'll read your email because like you literally bothered to message me again. It's so simple. Again, it's understanding dopamine. Most of these people have had a strike of inspiration.
They don't want to do
super
the hard
excited.
thing.
They're like, oh God, I need to like go message a whole bunch of people on LinkedIn right now and just get all the feedback right now. And it's like, oh, and by Wednesday, I'd even forgotten what the idea was. And it's like, hey, that's your problem, not my problem. Right. So just email me back in a month, and they don't.
Is there anyone that you see and like really admire and you think that person, even if you don't know them, but you've read their work, that you think, I love the way that they live their life and this is why? Yes,
a couple of my friends actually. So Chris Donnelly, my friend, is amazing doesn't check his phone much. He's got an EA. He's really trained her up really well on just like she does most of that stuff. He really is very present. He spends loads of time with his wife. He spends loads of time playing paddle with his friends. He does the work that he needs to do. He's really ambitious, but he's not in the weeds of the stuff that he doesn't need to be in. He really isn't. And so I love that. I find that really inspiring. My friend Simon Squibb, when I met Simon, we were both I was living in Camden, he was living in Belsize Park, so we used to hang out all the time together. And he was like, I'm really interested in forest schools for my son, etc., etc. And he ended up moving to Surrey and like doing forest school type stuff there and being really sort of anti the system that he was getting sucked into with entrepreneurship and just doing it sort of different way. And I really admire that stuff. Like I love people who absolutely make clear what their priorities are and then follow through with them.
That makes sense. Those are great examples. My final question, which I ask all of my guests, is if I had to watch one film or read one book or go and see one piece of art that will help me understand you better, what would it be?
Well, it's really random, but my two favorite entrepreneur films are, one is called Joy. That wouldn't necessarily help you understand me because it's about a woman. But it's sort of at the start of QVC and she makes this mop and she's just amazing. It's great. It's so great. And I think that's just like one of the greatest, underrated, but just greatest entrepreneur films. She's so exactly the poster person for entrepreneurship.
Like, determination,
the determination and hustle. Just the rabbit out of the hat every single time the chips are down. Like that film is so spot on. It so resonates. Like for any entrepreneur that's been through tough times, that film is bang on.
I love that film.
And then the other one is the miniseries, but the Defiant ones. So Dr. Dre and Johnny Iovine. See, early days Dr. Dre, middle days, big success and stuff. But really it's kind of actually a long-winded way of explaining how him and Johnny Iovine, who's one of the top producers in the world, created Apple Music. They created Beats and then they created Apple Music and like what they did to drive and change Apple. And you're like, that is just so esoteric. Like, how did you get from there and do that over there? But
in
that's
tech.
Totally. But that is the beauty of entrepreneurship. It's like, it's such an interesting journey. And as long as you're obsessed with the art of creation, then it'll take you in these wonderful, magical areas that you don't know what your future looks like. And that's what I love so much about that story is there's no way that Dr. Dre, like creating his first fucking beats for, a rap group would ever think about changing a technology company. It's just not part of his vision, but it doesn't need to be because all he ever cared about was being a creative entrepreneur. And so I guess those two films inspire me enormously.
That's why I find it interesting when people are like, what's the goal? And it's almost like I have certain goals, but I don't necessarily know where it will all end up, right? Because the world could change so much and who knows? Well, is there anything else that I haven't asked or that you'd like to say about this theme of slowing down, redefining success and growth for ourselves?
Massive fan of self-help books. I think they're amazing. I think people neg on them all the time. I think that is massively short-sighted. I think there's nothing more important than understanding yourself and reinforcing these messages over and over and over again. And actually one of my favorite self-help books that I've reread recently was a gift that you and Jolyon got me, which was Awareness. And that's probably up there with the funnest self-help book that I've read. That's like the most entertaining.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's so nice because self-help books are a bit serious, aren't they? They all take themselves a little bit seriously. And that one was like just laugh out loud funny. And it's so nice to read something that has a powerful message, is there designed to help you, is relatable, and you're actually laughing out loud. So read Awareness.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in. This episode was hosted and created by me, Tiana Tambridge. It was produced by Whitney Rosenthal. Sound and video recording, mixing, editing, and mastering is by Brazen Studios. Cover art designed by Natalia Ruche. Please subscribe to The Slowdown to be notified of upcoming episodes, tell a friend, and leave a review, because it really helps a new podcast like this get out there into the world. And remember, we're all heading to the same destination, and there is no prize for getting there early, so we might as well slow down.